I don't know if it's recording or not, but hopefully it is. All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 2023 edition of the OMARC Second Tuesday Zoom presentation. Tonight we will be talking about DMR, first with Pete N2MCI, who will be doing a bit of history, and then Mike KD2MNR will be doing a bit of programming tips and tricks. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Pete and let you take it away. Go ahead, Pete. And you have to unmute yourself.
Oh, I thought I did. Okay, here we go. So this is probably the least you should know. This is my perspective on DMR. I've been doing DMR for 6.5 years now, and saw a lot of changes. And I'll try and. This is my perspective. Is this the final word? No, it's always changing every day. So this should get you through the basic stuff that you need to know. All right, now how do I? Oop. So what is digital radio in general? Digital radio uses a vocoder to change everything from analog to digital. And I have some block diagrams here that show you how they work. Excuse me. And how it would work on receive versus transmit. These are the most popular digital modes, and you can. Does anybody know why I have them grouped this way, and why the colors are unique for each one? Anybody idea? Okay. Hearing nothing.
So the ones that use similar vocoders?
Yeah, exactly. They all use D-Star has an older vocoder. The next three use Ambi, and then the next one uses Ambi 2 Plus, I think it is. Don't quote me on all these. And then the last one is M17, which is brand new, and it uses Kodak 2. So when you do later on, and we have time, we could talk about hotspots, and we can talk about where you can cross mode. You can go in the case of go in on Fusion Wide and come out on P25 and talk to other P25 radios, at their hotspots. So you can do cross mode that way. So that's why I kind of grouped them together and left them like that. So DMR being the most popular wise, and why is it the most popular? Because hams are frugal. I learned that when I was in school. I had a ham instructor, and he said we're frugal. And when the radios got below $100, people would take a chance on it. I know that's how I got involved. When the radio got below MD380 got below $100, I bought one. And what do I do now? I was too far from the repeaters. So the other why it's popular, it has 2 time slices. It's the time domain TDMA, and there's actually each channel is on for so many milliseconds, and then it listens on the other channel, and it goes back and forth. But that only happens on a repeater and or a duplex hotspot. It doesn't happen on simplex. The Brandmeister network with hotspot support with MMDVM made things a lot easier to have a local hotspot way to connect to other people in the network, within your house. You didn't have to have a repeater and an internet up at the site, and all the things that kind of go along with that. So Brandmeister, along with the MMDVM support, as well as DV Mega, where that was the first hotspot. So that's how, and that DV Mega started with D-Star. D-Star did a lot of the same thing with Robin Cutshaw. He did a lot of that stuff, and they Brandmeister kind of did the same thing for DMR. It's very popular in the world because of some of probably the 2 top reasons. The radios are cheap, and you can basically have 2 conversations on a repeater at the same time. Again, if we have some time, we can show that. And the other thing that a lot of people like is it's PTT activated. So if you want to go to a particular talk group, all you have to do is key your radio for a quarter of a second, and it goes through the network, and then it assigns you that the talk group to your hotspot. So you could change channels relatively easy. It's just a matter of having things programmed in. And even then, there's some other ways around it. But PTT activated, I think, is another popular thing that a lot of people liked. And then there's the networks. Originally started off with C bridges. That was a Motorola proprietary thing, I would think, because for the most part, although there are some other, everybody had their own, but the C bridge, I think, is the name for Motorola's. And it's basically a server that you configure. I think there was 16 ports at the time. It's probably changed. This is back in the day, probably. And one of them had to be a peer one. So one peer would talk to another peer. So that was your gateway out of your cluster to somebody else's, so you can have your thing. You get more and more connections worldwide. And they did have some talk groups, the 310 through 317, and that they use those for connectivity to other groups. So you could have your own, like there's a lot of groups, like I think Texas has their own C bridge. I think North Carolina has one. New England has one. There's some in the New York City area. And most of their stuff, some of it can be cross bridged to other networks. But these originally 310 through 317 were the groups that they set up to do this originally. But it's expanded now with Brandmeister and other things. Brandmeister came out shortly, and then it supported hotspots, and that's when they also had, shortly after that, MMDVM came around, which is what's his name? I can't think of it. It's G4. It's a G4 call, but anyway, I apologize. He's did a lot of work with the first modem and got things running, and he had a lot of help. He got some help. The other thing you got to realize is that talk groups on one network can be different on another network. For example, the K2MCI C bridge system, their talk group 444 is, they call it the Metro channel, and that's on Brandmeister. It's bridged over to 31365, and there's other things like that too. I think Tri-States is also a different number if you're on the system versus a C bridge system versus what's on Brandmeister. So it's just like if you have a cable company, I get ESPN on one channel and you're going to get ESPN on another channel, but they're still the same ESPN. So it's, if you think of it like that way, it's kind of maybe helps you out how these things work. And what do you need to program up a radio? And so we're kind of working towards where Mike's going to take over here, but you have to get a radio ID. And I forgot to add something too. You also, at the same time, if you're going to use Brandmeister, log on to Brandmeister and get a Brandmeister user ID. You'll need that if you're going to create a hotspot. I forgot to input that into the file foil. And then you have to know what time slice to use, since there's two of them. When you're in simplex mode, the standard is to use time slice 1. And in repeater mode, you can use 1 and 2. However, there is an asterisk. The Clove machine is a mixed mode machine where you can talk to it on analog as well as digital. It's a standalone unit. It doesn't have any network connectivity. But because you're doing a mixed mode, it restricts you to one time slice. I don't remember which one it is, but it doesn't support both time slices. So that's why I put an asterisk there. And then when you use your MMDVM hotspots, the convention there is to use time slice 2. And when you get into that a little further, if we look at the hotspots tonight, we'll talk about that, and you'll see that on a simplex, it's there as time slice 2. And then they have a thing called color codes, and it's 0 through 15, and it's kind of like tone squelch on a repeater. That's what a lot of people analogy to. But where I think it would come in handy is in the commercial world, you have to buy a license. So if you have a company and you have a lot of small places, you can use, and if they're kind of close together, what you can do is buy one license, but have each location at a different color code, so they won't interfere with each other. You can use the same talk groups, but the color codes won't allow it. So I think, I can't say for sure, but I think some of the schools do that, where they have a repeater, a DMR repeater at certain schools, and so they use the same pair, repeater pair, and then they just change it so it won't interfere with other schools. You need to know, when you're programming up, you need to know talk groups and the frequency info. So which is very common when you do any kind of repeater. So that should be pretty straightforward. So what is a talk group? Talk group is a 1 to 7 digit number that users key to radio off of, akin to like a party line. So a lot of guys use minutes of value, which is 3136.8. And so everybody that is tied into that talk group can hear everybody. So it's like I said, a big party line. So if you have access to it, and how many times have we heard people around the world, go on vacation or move, whatever, they can still get back and talk to us because their radios, their system is tied into 31.368. And talk groups can be private or a group. I don't use private. The only time I use private is for Parrot, but I know Mike's going to talk about that, so I won't say that. But my feeling is it's probably best to use groups, but especially on a repeater, if you use private, people won't know that there's somebody there, and it's I guess not going to say bad manners, but it's not politically correct sometimes. Some repeater owners refuse to have private because of that reason, because now you're tying up a channel, a time slice, and the other users can't tell who's on it because it's a private conversation between two users. Talk group number is not the same as a radio ID, but you can use your radio ID as a talk group. That's, in fact, the Brandmeister doesn't want to give out talk groups anymore. They'll say use the ID of a repeater or your own personal one. So if you want to have your own hangout or something like that, that's one way. The only thing is, if everybody hangs out on their own talk groups and nobody hangs out on a common one, nobody ever talks to each other, and people get bored with it. Said, oh, there's nobody on here to talk to. So don't forget, minutes of value or whatever talk group you choose to patronage. But having your own talk group is good in the background, and we could talk a little bit more about that too. But or a place to go to. But just remember, if people aren't talking to people, they get bored and they move off. So when you're ready to start digital channels, what do we have to do? Well, the first thing you got to do is get the software up. And one of the first panels is going to ask you for the radio ID. And that's your radio ID that you get from radioid.net. So wherever that is. Say you want to add, and then you're going to start adding talk groups. When you program up a regular analog radio, you have tones, and they're already pre-canned in there, whether it be digital tone or an analog tone. They're in the radio already, so you don't have to program them in. With this, they're not. It's a name that you use, so you have to create those first. It's a little bit, I guess it's not counterintuitive, but you have to create the talk groups first. The thing is, though, once you have that talk group and you want to create another hotspot, or you want to go to a repeater that supports that talk group, you don't have to create it again. It's a one-time thing. So you create whatever talk groups you want to use, and then you can reuse them. They'll be in the pull downs, and you could use them, and that's that. And then once you have all the talk groups that you want, now you start building the channel up. And what I like to do is to build one channel, and you'll have a lot of names, and you'll see that in the software. And what I like to do for the name of the channel, I have several different hotspots or different frequency groups that I use. So I put, like, for my original radio was a blue stack. So I use BS in front of it for blue stack. And for my dual hotspot, it's DH for dual hotspot. And then for simplex hotspot, it's just hotspot, or I think it may have been the original one, which was at the time I used DV Mega. So that was my hotspot. So those are my three groups. And I have them all in my code plug channel wise. They're built. And by prefixing that, I can tell just by looking at it what group, I keep them together in a group. When I'm toggling through my groups, I can say, oh, this is the group for this hotspot. This is the group for another hotspot. This is, again, this is this is how I think. Some people I know like to put all the channels in one group. If it's going to be Mid-Hudson Valley will be for my hotspot, a repeater, everything is in one. So it's dependent upon what you think it's best to do, and whatever makes you, comfortable with it. And then once I have one of the channels I know working, I create a lot of blanks. And then all you got to do is cut and paste, or copy and paste into each one. So you don't have to do everything. And then there you just change the talk group and the name of the channel. So it speeds up the programming immensely. I did, you could easily do a small code plug in 5 or 10 minutes. It's not that hard. So, it's a little trick and things that I highly recommend. Once you have all the channels built, then you start building the groups, and that again is up to you, how the best way for you to work on it. It's nice to have somebody give you a code plug for your radio, but if they did it in a way that doesn't make sense to you and you can't find your way around, how good is it? You're kind of limited. So by knowing how to do this, I think it'll help you enjoy the radio better. You'll have a better radio experience. How's that sound? Here's my hints again. Here is to speed up. What you can do is, if you don't want to type in all the groups and things like that, there is a program called Contact Manager, and I have the link for it here. Tom, nice guy, and you can take the groups out of one radio code plug and import them into another. Like I have most of my radios were TYT, and then I bought a Connect Systems radio for my mobile. And all I did, it took me literally 5 minutes to import the talk groups in and build a few groups. So it immensely, I didn't have to type in every group like I just did. So it's a good handy tool. Tom, it's donationware. Help support the guy. He does a lot of work for it. The other thing too is, if you're going to be in a hotspot, don't forget to set the power to low, as low as it'll go. No hotspots a few feet away with 5 watts, it messes them up. There's not a lot of filtering on these things, hotspots it's best to keep the power low. And then on Brandmeister, talk group 9990 in private mode is parrot. And you say, what's parrot? Well, when you talk into it, it'll go out and then come back and repeat what you said. Well, it's good for, number one, to see how your audio is, how that sounds. And also you can use it to see how good your bit rate is, right? Are you having problems? Are you a little, are things working as good as they can be? And so good way to test things. So I recommend using Parrot. And the analog channels are the same as digital channels when you're building a code plug. So if you have, like, what I do is I also build my daily driver talk group, which may have 805 repeater in it, a couple of simplex frequencies, some DMR channels in there. So you don't have to try and, when you're driving, toggle into a different talk group. You can stay within that group or bank. you can interchange those words. So I call it, you know, the group you use the most, but have other groups underneath it. So if you want to go to this specific repeater and get on a specific talk group or whatever, you know, you can go to those channels, but the channels you use the most probably should be in a common bank and go that way. So when you program in analog, digital doesn't matter. And again, build the talk groups on what makes sense to you. There's a lot of different ways of people doing things, and I think the best is to, you know, what makes sense to you, but ask other people, get their opinion. Say, oh, do you like it this way or do you like it that way? You know, and then again, it'll help you have a better radio experience. So, all DMRs radios require the same thing. You have to know the frequency, you have to know the time slice, you have to know the color code, and you have to have a talk group. It's, you know, obviously the frequency from, you know, doing this analog to digital, the frequency is the same, but you have a few extra numbers here that you have to know. Again, the color code for the most part, most repeaters are 1. It could be changing, but that's a pretty common one. And the time slice is obviously depending upon what radio type you're using, simplex or repeater, and or hotspot. And then the talk group is the same for everything. The radio software does vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. One of the radios some of the guys had earlier on, I don't remember the name of it, but you had to create a talk group listing for the receive side. Most radios now, you just put one talk group in and it does both transmit and receive, where this one you could have different talk groups for receive and different for transmit. So again, you have to know your radio and get to know your software. So with that, I'm done. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike and see what he can show you real time, what I've just kind of been describing him. First of all, is there any questions? Okay, Mike.
All right, I guess I'm up. All right. What I'm planning to do is show you guys basically, let me go back to here and I will share my screen. We're going to start right off with getting a DMR number and all that. Let me see if I can share my screen so you don't have to look at my mug. Be this one. So share. All right, you guys should see my screen, right?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Radio ID registration. It's radioid.net register. So you're supposed to read all this stuff, and then down at the bottom it says I agree to all the above, even if I read it or not. So click on that, and then you can fill out the form, and pretty much as soon as you hit submit, you'll get a DMR number right away. It's like within like 30 seconds. The second that we got Linda's call sign, I went right on there and I made one up for her. So she has one also. And as you'll see in one of my Pi stars, the Pi star that's here in the house, it's under her call sign. But we'll go through that because I had a hard time making it work with my radio, because when you program Pi star, you have to make it so that it's public so that anybody can key up on your hotspot. So all right, so that's where you go to get your radio, your DMR number. And then where do we want to go? We're going to start out kind of old school-ish. Oh, wait, no, let's keep going through here. I need to get rid of that. How do I move that out of the way? Oh, no. All right. Oh, there it goes. All right, so you went there. Now you want to program. You want to do a radio or a hotspot first, Pete?
Do a radio.
Okay. All right, then we're gonna go kind of old school. I know Mose has one that he uses a lot. This would be for the MD380. So basically, a lot of the programming softwares are basically the same. So what you're going to do is you come in and you would take your TYT plugged into your computer and basically download what's in there. Oh, you guys are looking at my screen. So you'll come up here and you'll get the info that's already there in the radio, which is basically no channels, no nothing. But there is this stuff here. It'll have the model name and all that. So then what you'll want to do, like Pete was saying, you want to make your contacts first. Worldwide, your North America.
If you go up to basic though, Mike, that's where the ID goes in.
What's that?
Up in the basic,
Right. Yes.
or is it the general maybe? It's one of the top
No.
ones.
Yeah, general.
Okay.
Your call sign and your DMR number that you just got. Okay, so that's what mine is. So these are nice because you can just X out of them. So, like we were saying, HVDN, Hudson Valley Digital Network, 31368. You at least want that one. Okay, so you can talk to us. There's not really, when I first got into it this was my first DMR radio, the TYT MD380. I had a repeater in there on Mount Beacon, and there really wasn't much. There was worldwide and stuff like that, but and I think the color code was 10 on that, Pete. So anyway, so you at least want the Hudson Valley network because a lot of the people in the club, like Pete was saying, are on 31368. So if you just did that one, you put that in there. If you name it whatever you want, that you know what it is. 31368 is the call ID on that. It's a group call, like that. And you do want to have the parrot test in there just to make sure you key up your radio and you should hear yourself come back. If you don't, it's not working. So, all right. So you've got your talk group, your talk group in there. Now you want to go to make a channel. Okay, so we're going to come down here to where that is. It's down here somewhere. So you'll come down here and you will make your channel. Pick your frequency, name it whatever you want, probably the same name as the talk group. Digital 12.5, group list. I don't know why I did that. Color code 1 time slot 2. My Pi Star is time slot 2, so that's what I just put it in as. All right. Then what, Pete? Oh, when you've made this channel or many channels, the radio will never key up that channel through anything. Mose, where do you have to put it? In a zone. You have to put it in a zone. Your zones look like this. Okay. Every channel you have will show up in this box on the left, and then you pick and choose, and you put them. Take some of these and put them over here. Once you hit one, it'll say add. All right, so you'll add that one. Let's see, what else? You have to put it in there and save all this. And you name your zone because it'll come up on the radio. And basically, once you've done that, you at least have, let's call it, you have 31368. You will take that, you will save it, and then you will plug in your radio, which is already plugged in. Hit this button right here to write it to the radio. And when you get done, you will have 31368 in a zone on your radio. Now, you haven't tied into a repeater or a hotspot yet. And Pete, help me, anytime you hear anything that I'm saying wrong or anything.
No, I was just going to comment. If you notice, if you go back, if you look at the zones, you see Mike has got 5 different hotspots. So he created one jumbo 2.
No,
I mean, that's a good.
no. Those are just zones saying that it's for the hotspot, which I wanted to say before. On the TYTs, you can only put 16 channels in a zone. So I have all of these, okay? I have 76 group what are they called again? Digital contacts, the contact list. All right. That's why I have all these zones here. These are all just DMR. They, Jumbo 1, and then you're gonna have Jumbo 2, which is more of them, more of the states. All right, and then more states and more states and more stuff. Okay, but you can only put 16 channels. If you look over here, there's only, I can't move this. I gotta move this. All right, there you go. All right, you can only put 16 over here in this box. It won't let you put any more than 16. So that's why I have 5 zones just of DMR. And then the rest of them are all, Dutchess County analog, Warren County analog, to Arizona for when I go out to my sisters, and stuff like that. So now, basically, we've gotten you to where you have this in a radio. Okay. So now you've bought your Pi Star. So you will need to come back over here. And Pete, are you still there? I don't see you. And you're muted.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Oh, let's turn on the radio a minute.
Okay. Now you can get, is it download Pi Star? That's the image thing?
I'm sorry, what?
Is that the image, the download Pi Star here?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so you will go here and you will hit download Pi Star. That's right. You got to do the right one. Which is which one, Pete? Be the latest one.
Yeah, would depend upon which hotspot you have. You have what Raspberry Pi or Orange Pi or Nano Pi.
Well, I have the jumbo spot. Okay. So basically, I believe I have this file on my computer that that's what's on the card in the hotspot, which most of you know what the hotspot looks like. But if you don't, I will put it up in front of the camera here.
I have another slide presentation if you want me to get going on the hotspots themselves and talk. What kind of
if you want to do that, but basically you're going to download this file, take the card out of the hotspot, put the file on the card, put it back into the hotspot and fire it up. It's going to take 2 minutes for it to come up. All right, and there's no. You want to go through programming that, Pete? With you got to go the 192.168.50.1 because it doesn't have any internet to it yet.
Well, I have ways around that, but I'll talk about that real quick.
All right, if you have something easier or better, let me know because that's the way I've been doing it.
But if you see, the last the one that's the RPI, those are for all Raspberry Pi. So there's different boards you can attach your hotspot to. So as a result, there's different distributions for these different. There's a Nano Pi, which is a different animal than a Raspberry Pi, as well as I guess Orange Droid. I don't ever saw that one. There's Orange Pi. So there's different boards, carrier boards that are Pis. They're not Raspberry Pis. They're other companies. So they've allowed you to put the Raspberry Pi, the MMDVM hat on any of those. So that's why you have different distributions for different Pis that you're using. So obviously the Raspberry Pi is the most common one, but there are other ones out there. So I'm going to, if you want to stop casting there, Mike, I'll switch over to the other presentation I had, which is the one I used last time. I updated a couple slides here.
All right, well, basically showing you the TYT, the Anytones are pretty much the same with the software on programming them. It's just a little nicer looking. I mean, I think that the difference between TYT's programming software and Anytone's programming software is like Windows 95 to Windows 10, So we'll just go with that theory. But I will bring that up anyway. So there we go.
So this is the slide presentation that we did, was it a year ago, about the least you should know about hotspots. So I'll kind of talk about things, and I have some screenshots here. We could talk about that. And I'll show you, I think I have the panels where you set things up, but I don't have any blank discs available to do that right now. So obviously, but it's a little harder to but we'll talk about it. So the building blocks of a Raspberry Pi is the radio, there's a modem, and then there's some kind of interconnect, and then it talks to a network computer, and that's your Pi. But there's other things too, but we'll talk about more about that later. But the Pi hat itself is the first two blocks here: the radio and the control block, and the modem. The chip they use most of the time is the 7021 chip. Very common. It's a small radio, basically, on a chip. And then they have different processors to drive that chip, as well as become the modem, and that's the Pi itself. And then from there, you normally would, since when it's a hat, it uses the Raspberry Pi GPIO pins to talk to itself. There's ports on that it uses. You could also use it through USB. Some will connect through the USB ports and do the same thing. And then there's also some that you can talk to it through Bluetooth. So we'll talk a little bit more about those as we go further along. And then the basic network connection is some type of Linux distribution on somewhere or some network operating system, right? There's something, because you can have, there's Windows solutions, and we'll get to those later, as well as most common one is MMDVM host, and the MMDVM firmware resides on the hats. There's two pieces that they kind of talk to each other. That's the whole key to MMDVM. There's two pieces, and they work together as in unison. So we'll go to the next one here. And so here's my original hat. There was no Dziomba when I got started. The only hat available at the time was DV Mega, and that's just sitting on top of a BlueStack board, which is a board that has a Bluetooth module on it. And I remember, like I said, there's some connection, and that's how I connect to it to using BlueDV. Then now, like Mike said, when the thing comes up, it comes up in hotspot mode if it can't find anything. Well, it turns out you can get a dongle and plug it in this port here, and then you can wire it into your network. So you'll have, and the way the thing is every one of these dongles ever made has the same MAC address. So once you plug it in and find out what the IP address of that is, it's always going to be the same. You can swap as many hotspots as you want. The dongle itself has that. There is a way to go into there. Since I have multiple dongles, the networks don't like the same MAC address. So we found that there's a spot you can change it and have the hotspot say, use this MAC address instead. Don't use the hardware MAC address, but use the software one that's going to give you. And here's,
and I don't use them.
And here's so here on the bottom on the hotspot next to it, you can see the board. The top board is the MMDVM board, and there's the two chips. One is the radio chip, and I think the one on the left is the radio chip, and the one on the right is the processor chip. And then below it is a Raspberry Pi Zero, and it snaps together. I got these cases, found them online. They were just a generic case, and they work pretty well. So now the next one here is this is my dual hotspot. And this one is, you'll see 3 chips on it. It has 2 radio chips and a processor chip. Underneath it is a Pi 3. You can't really see, you can just see the USB and Ethernet ports coming out of that. But that allows, we haven't really, it's more like a repeater than it is than a simplex hotspot. It acts, if you have a repeater that's on Brandmeister and a dual hotspot, they look the same, they act the same. It's just, one's a more high power and than the other, and it has a better receiver than the other, but it's the same. You can use, there's boards, and I'll show you in the next page. And the next one is, this is a very popular N5 BOC dual hotspot. He redesigned it. I guess the guy is, that's his day job, doing this stuff. So he did a really nice thing. They're really quality boards. Although I have had this dual hotspot for about 4 or 5 years now, never had a problem with it. And then on the left this is my high power hotspot. So remember before we said we needed a Pi, some type of processor, which is also is a modem, and then a radio. In this case, there's a hat that goes on top of that, but there's no radio chip on it. And what they do is it comes out on a DB9 out the back of it, and that goes into a high-speed chip. If you guys remember packet, but there's a lot of radios. They're not as many as it used to be, but it used to be packet ports. Used to call them. It did 9600 baud. They're basically tied right to the discriminator and the demodulator. There's no other processing, so it's right there, and you get. So this radio has a jack on the back. It's a commercial radio and has a jack on the back that you can get into those ports, and works fairly well. And then the other one is this is another Pi. The red part is the Pi, and it's MMDVM. And again, it's for a high power hotspot or a repeater. The only difference is a configuration change, but they're both, they both will do simplex hotspots, high power hotspots, or you could drive a full repeater off of them. And this is one that Steve had, and I had at my house here. I took a picture of it, and this is a different company, but it does the same thing. It hooks up to a radio. There's a DB9. That's not the same thing, and then here's some alternates that just are relatively new. This slide on the left, on the right side of it is called a full size hotspot, or MMDVM board, and all it is it's designed to fit the same form factor as a full Pi 2 or Pi 3, not a Pi 0. But I found recently that you can create a little carrier board that will support either MMDVM or DV Mega, and there's a little chip on here, that you can get relatively inexpensively, and all you have to do is just wire it to the pins that it talks to on the port where the GPIO would be, and it's a TTL port, TX RX data port, and that can go into, I think you could probably plug it into a Raspberry Pi if you can configure it right, as well as Blue DV. It's another program that's multi-platform, and it doesn't do some of the things that MMDVM / Pi-Star does, but it's a good alternative. And then you said, you got a radio here for? Well, believe it or not, this has got special open software on it, and inside it has you can use it as a hotspot, as a higher power hotspot than a normal hotspot. I wouldn't run 4 or 5 watts on it all the time; the radio would burn up. But if you're running a watt, 3/4 of a watt, it's going to get you neighborhood coverage. And it will detect, you can set it up in the what type of you want it to be, MMDVM or Blue DV device. And when you plug it in to either a Blue DV, and I think you can also plug it into a Raspberry Pi and configure it that way. We can look, and you can use this instead of a regular hotspot or a MMDVM board, radio board. So it's kind of a different way of looking at things. So I'm giving you some other options and things like that. This radio also, I didn't talk too much about it, but remember I said it's like a party line when you're on a talk group. And most radios, you have to be on that talk group to hear them. Well, this radio, you can, as well as I have one of the TYTs, you can turn off some of that filtering and you can hear any talk group that comes through. So if I want to just program on my hotspot, a talk group to be active on my hotspot, I can listen to it. I don't have to program up a channel. It can just automatically does. This radio also does, my TYT only does groups. This will actually, you can turn the filtering all the way off and it'll tell you the color code, the time slice, and the talk group. So all the missing pieces. So you can use this to, if you're listening to a repeater, oh, I want to listen to that conversation. These are it'll tell you on the screen what it is, and you can write it down, and then you can program your radio to do that, or any radio if it supports it. So it's kind of a neat function to have for finding out things and listening to things. And so when you do get the hotspot going, one of the first things I like to do is you can do, there's across the top, you have a dashboard, and I think under administration, it'll say update. Update the thing, it'll update the latest radio ID files and any updates that it needs. It's best to do that. And let's see what else here. Okay. So when you're setting it up a hotspot, you're going to go under general configuration. I think it's the one on the end. Let's see, what was it? Configuration panel across the top there. You click on that, and this is where you set up all the different things. So
I have that up too, Pete.
okay. So in mine is called Pi Star number 1, in this particular one, and this is my ID and that. And then you could also put in here, if you go down further to the next group, DMR configuration, I'm on Brandmeister 3102 server. And at the end of it, you can put a suffix so you can have multiple things. This didn't exist in the beginning. So if you wanted another hotspot or something like that, you had to get another ID. So this was a nice thing to have. Here's my color code 1. So this is the basic things. And you can see, excuse me, I have selected STM, MBM. This is a simplex hat. And let's see. The other thing is when you go into expert mode, you can go in here and set you see the RF offsets. And when you get a hotspot, it may tell you what numbers to put in. The crystal could be just a fraction off. So you'll need this to get it to be on frequency. There's some other things, some other tools you can use. We could talk about that at another time, but that's and also here there's a level. You could see I have my DMR transmit level set to 55. They recommended on some of the older MD380s that audio needs to be a little hotter, so you can adjust the level there. I found out when I was building my high power hotspots, there's 2 things that make the radio work real well. It's got to be, the frequency has to match and the audio level has to be right. So when you're doing a hotspot, for the most part, the audio level is pretty good. So you're only messing with frequency. But on a radio, the frequency is in the radio itself. You have to set that separately. And you can also mess around with the audio levels until you get them right. And there's some tools, I don't know if I have it in here or not, but MMDVM Cal is another tool they have. And you can really zero it down so you get no loss at all. It's dead nuts on, and it's the best you're going to be. Obviously, things can change around, but when you're setting things up, it's really nice to do, have it tuned up right. And here's Brandmeister. Did you want to go back to, before we go to Brandmeister, Mike, did you want to break in and you can have some stuff that you want to talk about on the dashboard?
Well, I did want to bring up that Mo's you were talking about the transmit and receive offsets. He
Yes.
has a TYT-MD 380 and an 868 Anytone. And I programmed the radio for him and brought it to his house. And the Anytone worked fine on his hotspot. And the TYT worked fine on his hotspot. The Anytone would not key up the hotspot. And I tried all kinds of stuff. He tried all kinds of stuff. And then he I don't know, Mose, you can tell the story. He had to mess with the offsets. So
yeah, Mose and I talked about it, but yeah, you can tell the rest of the people.
yeah. Mose.
Yeah, when I got my hotspot, it was set at minus 200, and I didn't really understand how it all worked. But I was hearing and reading stuff that you might slightly adjust it, but I had to radically adjust it to get the Anytone to come in. I went from minus 200 to plus 50. And that was what got it to working again. Also, the TYT still works in that range, but Pete just said something too that set off a light bulb for me. He was talking about the crystals in those little radios might not be just perfect. So I think that kind of helped me understand what I was doing. So don't be bashful about adjusting that BER.
Right. See, mine offset. Mine are at 0, and I've never changed them. So, and I don't seem to have a problem. So yeah. All right. I wanted to go back up to, there was a couple of things I thought of that I don't remember.
In a follow-up, we could probably have almost a whole presentation on MMDVM Cal, and that's really a good program. Between that, I also have a little SMD module, and you can key up a radio in analog mode or your hotspot with MMDVM Cal, and you can see the spike where the thing is transmitting. So you can tell by looking at that. I have 3 radios, and they're all a little bit different error rates, so I know that they're off by a little bit. And like I said, when I was testing the high power hotspot, 100 hertz, which doesn't seem that much, but it did make a difference. So it's really imperative. That's the one, I don't say stipulation or drawback to DMR. I think it's always been a little bit less forgiving about being on frequency compared to some of the other modes.
Okay. All right. Should I share my screen again? I just want to go through a couple other things.
Jerry, did you have a question? I saw your hand go up, or you just... Okay.
Pete, you were saying that you are at 3102.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm up to 3104 because it seems like every time they come out with like when they came out with 3104, 3101 disappeared.
3101 was in New York City, and it was the one I used. This was the closest one. That's the one I used.
Right.
They got a denial of service attack on them, so they had to switch to a different server that had protection for denial of service. So they changed their IP, and a lot of people got upset about that, especially repeater owners. It was in the wintertime, and they couldn't get up to their sites to change the IP address. So there, a lot of the repeaters weren't being used, couldn't be used on the network because of that. So a lot of people, there was a kind of an uproar about it. So 3108 came out. So that was where all the cool kids, that was supposed to be, there's not that many people on it, is where we do, it's got the latest stuff, and it was where all the cool kids were hanging out. And then 3108 went away. So I had gone to 3102, and shortly after that, 3101 went away, and then 3104 came out. So that's kind of the semi-history. Back when I got started, there was no Pi-Star. There was a Linux distribution, and people would take the MMDVM host application and put it on top with maybe some type of dashboard, a basic dashboard, as well as VNC, so you can VNC into it your hotspot. So it was like being on the dashboard, like being on the Pi itself, but without it monitoring like that. It was just VNC in. So a lot of those, and what Pi-Star did was, all it is it's a panel driven front end for all these different settings. I had to, before it was, and if you even go into expert mode, you'll see MMDVM host file. It's basically the INI file that they used to use. We used to have to type things in. Now everything is panel driven. So it helped a lot. You didn't have to know what the secret decoder ring was. You had it. Here's all your options.
All right. Well, is everybody seeing my screen now? Okay. Moses is shaking his head. As you'll notice, this one is Linda's call sign set up for her. This is her DMR number, frequency. And now what I was saying before about how I had to make it public so that both of us could use the Pi-Star, because it looks for a DMR number. It basically is looking for this DMR number if you have this as private. Okay. So now my DMR number is 1136681. So it's not really looking for this, but I can key it up because I did public right here. So, it took a while to figure that out. And then basically the whole Brandmeister thing we're going to talk about now is to get this little hotspot security password. And this is mine, obviously, which DMR, it's easy to remember. I don't care who knows it, whatever. You have to have that in there, otherwise it's not going to work. There's a lot of stuff that you have to have in place, otherwise the whole thing just crumbles. So all right. So Pete, if you want to go through the Brandmeister stuff, because really I went on Brandmeister's site and none of my stuff is showing up. So I don't know why, but it all works. I just keyed it up a little while ago.
Okay, you want to stop sharing, and I'll share it real quick.
Oh yeah, I could do that. All right, there you go. And we're gonna, we'll be on hand to answer any questions. Or I know we're throwing a lot of information at you, like all at once, but hopefully some of it'll stick. And if you get something that, what did he say? Contact one of us and we'll answer. So, all right, Pete, so it's all yours.
So this is my dashboard, and you see the sysop dashboard. It comes up with these two. These are one was a repeater that we had in the area that it was taken down, and like I said before that, there was no suffix. So yeah, when I ordered the one repeater, I ordered two repeater IDs. I could probably return them at some point, but And then if you look down the side, you'll see all my hotspots. And I have, I think there's 3 listed here now. It's obviously, this is an older file, but you can see if it's green, you'll have status. Why is it? I can't see. Yeah, there it is. So the first 2 are online, 2 and 10. But the number 15 one, it was, I as I build spots or do testing and stuff like that, I always try and create a different number. So that's that. And if you go across the top header there, I think it's under user ID, and that's where you would create your password, because the user ID for this and password, the user ID is your call, and there's a password to get to this panel. However, you have to go in, and what Mike was just showing you, you have to get a number for MMDVM. So when it goes into the the PyStar, there's a password, and I don't remember which tab it's under off the top of my head. It's under one of those.
You go into self-care.
Self-care. Okay.
Yes. It's at the bottom of the page when self-care comes up.
All right. It's been a while since I've done it, so this is the particular thing for one of the hotspots I had. It's actually the number 10. If you look across, if you look at the link page across, this is Brandmeister page, and it tells you the last 2 digits are the I use for number 10. And this is where you can create talk groups that are always on. So if you always want to have your personal talk group there, use your personal radio ID number as a talk group, you can put this on so it's always there. It can be good, it can be bad, but this way you can have multiple talk groups up at the same time and listen to multiple talk groups. With a simplex hotspot, when you PTT, that talk group will be there forever until the server crashes or reboots. But it's there for the most part. I've keyed them up, and I'll come back a month later, and it still says that that's it's like auto static. It creates, but you can also have it. In this case, I've talked on it. So I got an auto static as one as well as I have one that's there permanently. So if you do a 4000, which means to drop all the connections, the dynamic connections, one of those will still be there for this. It won't drop the one that got activated with PTT. That makes sense. Yeah.
I have found that 2 or 3 cycles of doing drop call, drop dynamic groups, and then reset connection, refreshing the page, doing that 2 or 3 times will eventually get rid of it.
Not the static one, the one that was
no, not static. You have to remove static from here.
Right.
The temporary statics will go.
You can play games and get it to shake itself loose. Where that becomes handy is, say you got onto 3100 or 9300, one of the really popular talk groups there's constantly people on there. If you're in a simplex hotspot, it's real tough to break in the key to 4000 to drop that. So putting it on through the static page here, you can also set up in your hotspot a way that links this, so you can do. I don't know if I had that. I think I had it on the page. Maybe I do. Maybe it's still in here. But anyway, you can add without having a PTT. But if you start talking, now you're going to have that second instance of that talk group, and to drop it is really, really difficult, especially if some of these guys are real quick keyers, and if you don't get in there at the right second when the repeater, when your hotspot drops, it's kind of it's difficult. So, but I recommend, if you're going to do that, use it on low usage talk groups, right? Things you're going to want to listen to. Like I said, maybe your own hotspot, maybe some other groups that don't get a lot of traffic. If you're going to try and put something statically on connected to your hotspot that's got a lot of activity, you're not going to hear anything else. So it's kind of a waste. But so that's how that goes. Now, this is my dual hotspot. So some people have said, how do you know what to put on what time slot? It's whatever you want to listen to. And in this case, I have the STEM talk group 31630 on time slice 1, and time slice 2. I have other talk groups that I listen to. This is the Minutes and Valley talk group, which is 31360. I have the 900 megahertz repeater group. Again, low. They're all low usage for the most part. And then Open GD77 talk group. And then I have, which used to be the repeater that was on the air. I have that, and I do a lot of testing with that talk group. So I'm not bothering people, or people don't have to hear me. I can test over on that talk group. And it's originally, it was the local talk group for the repeater. That's why I set it up that way. But you can see that there's, so in this case, there's supposed to be a net on. You can also, one of the neat things, because there was a net that some of the guys wanted to hear on astronomy. So I didn't want that talk group on all the time. You can schedule time. You can schedule to have a talk group statically turned on. I used to have, when we had the repeater up, there wasn't a lot of activity, wasn't a lot of users locally. So I would have tri-states come on during the drive time. So if I was driving to work or coming home, tri-states would be on the repeater, and I could at least listen, and I could break in if I wanted to talk to, but just some way to generate traffic. Again, I didn't keep it on all the whole time. Now on a duplex hotspot or repeater, when you key up, it only stays active for 15 minutes. If you don't talk on that talk group, it'll automatically drop it, right? That's the way it used to be from the beginning. And then they made the simplex hotspots, because guys were on nets, and all of a sudden they weren't, listening to other people talk, and all of a sudden it was drop. So they changed that rule for a simplex hotspot. It won't drop a PTT activated talk group on a simplex, but on a duplex, if there's no other activity going to that talk group, say I was talking to somebody on tri-states, and I talked to him, and then we signed, and he was or some other people got on there. If it wasn't automatically static, it would that connection would drop in 15 minutes. So it's kind of nice for the repeater owners that they don't have people, bringing up things, and like 310. Some of the really, like I said, some of the really popular talk groups where 310 isn't as popular as it used to be, but 3100 or North America, or any of the other ones that are a lot of people on. If somebody keys it up and starts listening to it, and they never talk anymore, after 15 minutes, that link will drop automatically. So that's, for a repeater owner, that's a nice thing to have. So, and then here's more panels and you'll see activity, and you can see there's a way to link your Brandmeister account to your Pi-Star. So you don't have to go into Brandmeister every time you want to make a change. You can go, most people have their, I use my dashboard a lot, but you can, I think the next panel is the next panel. Well, no, I guess I don't. I thought it was there, but I guess not. Yeah, you could set it up so you can select the talk. You can select and add dynamically select talk groups, and it'll show up in the list here when you're on. Oh, here it is. Actually, it's right here, right in the middle of the page. It'll say Brandmeister Manager, and here you can add a talk group. And then as the first column, the next column is what time slice do you want to put it on, and do you want to add it or delete it. So if I had something in that column I didn't want to hear anymore, I can go in and put that all in there and click modified static, and it would take that talk group away. So you don't have to go into Brandmeister to do this. There's a portal API that you can enable to do all this for you. So I thought I had it in here, and I did have it. Okay. And you could see what I do too is have stuff. This was from probably a year or two ago, and you can see the history. So what's nice about it is when we had the repeater up, it was a Motorola repeater. It was not it was on Brandmeister, but didn't have the MMDVM host, and then it's a Motorola brand. So there was no dashboard. So what I did was I emulated. I put the same stuff on both my local dual hotspot and the repeater, so I could keep an eye on, based off of this, I could see what the traffic was on and who was there and who was using it, who wasn't using it, and what talk groups they were using. So just so I could get a gauge, if there was a problem, I'd have some type of history, at least for the day. So there's dashboard's a very powerful tool. And what do I have on the next panel? So you can see where I have there's some nice things here. There's another guy that has a really nice dashboard. The guy's kind of he's a smart guy. I'll put it that way, and I'll leave it at that. But he has more information and more things you can do. But you can see, doesn't say. I was looking for the next page down. On a hotspot, and you can see I have the different colors backgrounds I customize for each. There's ways you can go in there, and if you have multiple hotspots and you're using the dashboards, by looking at the dashboard, I could tell this is the blue, this is my dual. This red one is probably the default. It's probably a simplex, and here's the blue one again, and you can see both time slices are at the bottom there are enabled. I can't see it on the bottom of the other one. I chopped that off a little bit, but there's all the activity. You can see that there's activity can be on. There's one here that was on time slice 1, but for the most part, a lot of local guys were on talking on time slice 2. So there's a lot of information on the dashboard. Let me run that here. So the other thing is, here's the same kind of panel, and you can see that time slice 2 is only port enabled. Time slice 1 is disabled. So that's why I said when you're programming up a radio, it's best to use it. Time slice 1 may work when you program a radio on a hotspot, but it really likes to be on 2. So why mess with fate? And trying to see what else I have here. So in this case, remember I was getting back to that one of the first pages. I talked about the different ambi coders, and you can do cross modes. So in this case, I'm coming in on YSF, and I'm going out, and I'm also enabling the YSF to P25 bridge. So it takes the codecs, the data is the same for each of those radios, 25, P25, as well as fusion wide, but the packets, the data around it is different. So what this does is it takes and reads in the information and strips off the audio packets and then reassembles it with the P25 packets and sends it out. So you can. Okay, so here's Jim actually on stem here, but so that allows you to do cross moding, and it's a different way, not something else to get into. Let's see. I'm trying to remember what these panels were all about here. Oh, and at the bottom here, you can start up the node you want to go to on. In this case, I think this is the one of the 900 megahertz guys repeaters. He has got a hotspot. But again, here's all the things, and you can see that's set for YSF, and also YSF, that's the mode enabled. And then the network status says it's network wise, it's YSF and going to the P25. And that's the frequency, and there's some other settings. So that's about all I had for hotspots. I don't know if anybody else wanted to talk about anything. Any questions on that? Obviously, we can help out any way we, or want to recap on something. Unless, Mike, you have anything else?
I wanted to go into, well, just touch on the private stuff. I mean, if you're going through a hotspot, it's your hotspot. You're not tying up someone's repeater. Most of us are on hotspots.
Correct.
So it's not like we're tying up somebody's repeater. So basically, if you want to go private with someone, Scott went and found out everybody in the world's DMR number, and he probably made a whole database of everybody's DMR numbers, which basically, let me share this. All right, right here, all these right here, except for the 4,000, obviously, and the 99. Like here's Matt's DMR number. That is a talk group. Okay. So basically, and Jim and I did this a few times. And Neil has, he's got a radio sitting in his kitchen that basically it's tied to me apparently. So, but Jim, KD2VAH, and I have done this. The only thing we noticed was, and I think I figured it out, was I think we need to have our own channel with our DMR number, basically. Okay, because on the Anytones, if you, like, I called Jim, and Jim would go to my DMR number on his radio, and when we would talk to each other, when the one person would stop talking, on the other person's radio, it would say missed call. So basically, if I called Jim on his DMR number, he would need to go to his DMR number channel. Okay. And then I think you're both on the same talk group, so it's not going to say you missed a call. And we've actually done text messaging also through that. The other thing that I wanted to touch on, just one more thing, and I think I'm pretty much done. So let's go back to channels. This is all the private stuff, and then the 900. These are all simplex, DMR simplex. And you don't need to go through a hotspot to do these. It's simplex basically. So if you're in the same area, like at field day, we were using it. You pick one of these channels, whether it's 441, 500, any of these. If everybody gets on the same one, everybody will be able to talk. And you're not going through a hotspot. You're not tying up a repeater. It's just like talking on simplex. So that was the other thing I wanted to touch on. And I think pretty much
the standard though is to use talk group 99. So if you want to talk privately, obviously.
Yes. That is in the, where are they? The talk groups, 99 right here.
Okay.
Simplex. But it's not really going through a hotspot.
True, but you still need a talk group to talk on.
Right.
Common. So that's what your receiver is going to listen for.
But they all go, all of the let's go back to those. All of these are in the same talk group, the DMR simplex.
Correct.
Yes.
You could also, if you really wanted to, create your own, right? If you want to go rogue, you could create your own. It's probably best to find your own channel to do that, because people using 99 won't, you can interfere with them. But
well, yeah,
because there was a guy at a ham fest and he was on talk group 9. So because my radio I have the talk groups filtering to make them, basically it's a carrier squelch. I hear any talk group that comes through, I'll hear. So I was hearing this guy talk, and I was standing next to Jim, WATUMP, and he goes, I'm not hearing them. Why? I says, well, I have my filtering turned off for talk group. So here's any talk group. Again, it's good and bad, right? Because you think you're talking to somebody and your radio's not on that talk group, and it's so you have to look. You have to be a little more aware.
Right. But now what I've heard is if you're doing the private call thing with someone, you need to disconnect from the last one you were on, I believe. Otherwise, everybody will hear you. From what I've heard.
That's why I said if you can have somebody go to us and you can set it up statically, your own talk group as a group, and set it up there, and then have a way to either scan or have that talk group be heard when you're on another channel, then you can listen to that. And if you're calling somebody too, say KD2MNR, N2MCI on Mid-Hudson Valley, so people know that if they're scanning, what channel you're going to go back to them on. Sometimes people have multiple scanning channels, and you tell them what talk group you're on, so they know what to set their transmit talk group to.
Right. Now, the other question I have for you, Pete, going back to the private ones, if I was talking to Jim on his DMR number, he is on his DMR number, we are having a conversation, can someone else, like, because anybody's radio that I've programmed, these are in there, the private, you're even on the list. Like, all right, I'm talking to Jim. Now you punch up Jim's DMR number as a private call. Could we all be talking?
I don't know that. That's why it's best to do a group.
Silence is very reassuring.
That's why it's best to do a group.
Yeah.
So anybody can hear it.
That's a lot more programming on my part.
my radio, like I said, it has a way you can turn off talk group filtering. It also has a way you can turn off talk group filtering for private messages. So I could hear a private message.
Okay.
Even though it just ignores it, and it's like carrier squelch, right? It's going to pass anything. And then the other radio I have with the Bofang with the OpenGD77 firmware on it, that'll probably listen to anything too. So there is ways that I can probably listen to it, but.
Okay. Well, I wanted to talk about the programming of the radios, and I pretty much did. If there's any questions, comments, anything, you can email me. It's my call sign at Gmail. So that's about it for me. I just wanted I want people to get comfortable with the software and programming their radios and not having, major problems and all that. So, that's where I was going with all this. Back to you, Pete.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's nice to have somebody build you a code plug, but if you can't find your way through it, you're going to get frustrated and say, this DMR, I don't like it. And, what they say, if you teach a person to fish, they'll catch fish. If they're, so.
Yep. All right. Well, that's about it for me. And anybody's radio that I do program, I go through it with them and, say, this is what I've done. Except for Dave, I just handed him his radios back and, here you go. So, okay. So yeah, that's about it for me. I got to get going to bed pretty soon. So, I got to get up early again.
The Baofeng radio, I lost my video, huh? The Baofeng radio I have here. Oh, there it is. You can, in VFO mode, here you go. I think Neil's got one too.
We all have them.
It's got the ham firmware on it, and you can do a lot more things on the fly. I could go to into the VFO mode and punch up, just punch in a talk group, and I don't have to program the radio. So it makes a lot of that stuff. I think even the new connects, there's some new firmware for the Connect Systems mobile, which I haven't updated in a while, but that they just came out with something similar to that, as well as being able to, they call it the radio listens on more things when you go into promiscuous mode. So there's a lot of other options out there. They're kind of niche for the ham market. It's not, you got to remember these radios were designed for commercial. It's a standard standard they have they're driving to, and we're kind of piggybacking on it. That's why we have a number, not a call sign. So
right.
But there are some people that are making some ham firmwares, as well as I know Anytone is kind of has some ways of doing things that are a little bit more open than a standard Motorola or some other commercial manufacturer where they're locking everything down and you can't do all these kind of crazy things that we like to have done.
Yeah.
So the radios that originally were designed for the OpenGD77 firmware, which is a great package. Most of the original radios are no longer made. There was a newer Baofeng model that the manufacturer changed the chipset and now no longer works with the firmware as well. The OpenGD77 people, though, are actively developing the firmware for some other radios. So it does pop up for other things every now and then, which is nice. And definitely worth watching the site to see what they're going to develop for next. There's been some talk around the club, some of the nets and everything about these cheap Cotre radios, COTRE. I've tried a couple of different ones. They're all based on the same chipset. There's no special firmware for them. They don't do promiscuous mode, but boy, are they cheap.
That's the one you have me set up on, right?
Yeah, the no display one, I think I paid $12 for.
And it sounds really good.
The other one, which I picked up, has really, really good audio. They're mono band rigs, UHF only. There's a lot of banter about opening them up to do VHF. They don't really do VHF. It's just, talk. It has to do with the chipset that's in them, though. And I think going down the road, we're going to see some other radios based on this that use this same chipset. Coming up, not this month, but probably next month, in one of my little 15-minute meeting presentations, I'm going to talk about DSP technology and why we have $20 radios and how that works. So I also wanted to add, you'll hear the term promiscuous mode sometimes. It confuses a lot of people. They don't know what it actually means. It's a networking term. One of the things about DMR is that it's a networked mode, and it mimics computer networks and how it's arranged and organized and how the different nodes talk to each other. Promiscuous is a term from networking. When you're analyzing a network, you can put certain network cards or adapters into what's called a promiscuous mode, where you can route every packet on that network through your computer or network card and analyze it. So that's where the term comes from. So basically, when you turn a radio into promiscuous mode or monitor mode, some of the different firmwares have a different name for it. It just means you're going to get every bit of traffic that's going through your either repeater or local node. You'll hear everything, not just the talk group or channel you're currently tuned into. And Pete covered that, very well. And it's neat. You'd say, well, why wouldn't I want to leave that on all the time? You'll learn why.
Group 91.
Because sometimes you just don't want to hear all of it. But there's a lot of cool stuff. And like Pete was saying, DMR basically is clunky for us because it was a commercial product that's been kind of shoehorned into ham radio. D-Star has its own bit of clunk because it was kind of over-engineered. They were thinking along the lines of what's called reflectors and other ham terminology, but it also can be confusing if you're not familiar with configuring that.
Well, I would say if anybody wants to try and get into D-Star,
Scott is the man for D-Star.
I figured it out, but it took forever. And then Scott came over and he reprogrammed any radio that I have that'll do D-Star to where you don't have to hit a million buttons now. Like in the truck, you turn it to, I call it truck D-Star or whatever it is, and it's just there. You don't have to hit DV, you don't have to do anything. I don't know what he did. I don't care what he did, but if it stops working, he's gonna do it again. So he is the D-Star guy.
But yeah, it's a neat topic, and you know, I kind of hope at some point the hobby kind of settles into one format, but it may never happen because that seems to be the way things happen in this hobby sometimes, unfortunately. So thanks, guys. Really appreciated the
If you got 2 minutes, I'm going to show you real quick the Blue DV program. And I have that little board that I built with the carrier board, and I could show you what it looks like real quick.
Can I just say, I'm pretty much done, and I'll leave this on, but I probably won't be in the room. I gotta get ready to go to bed and all that. So, so everybody, thank you for stopping by, and we will talk to you guys. And like I said, if there's any questions, KD2MNR@gmail.com. Anytime, whatever, I will get back to you. Just let me know. So I'm going to be leaving the room for a minute.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mike.
This is real quick. This is the Blue DV program I was telling you about. This is the Windows version of it. I have a version on my phone that I use the Blue Stack with to the DV Mega. And so what you do is, that's not what I wanted to do, but I guess I got to go back. I guess because I'm screen sharing, I can't. It's messing me up. But so you would turn on the serial port, and now it's you can see it's reading the firmware on the MMDVM hat, and then in this case, depending upon how you have set up D-Star Fusion, it doesn't do cross moding. It's just straight up whatever mode. And then here, and you can see I'm connected to, and it also has status on the bottom says I'm connected to that, and I could do this real quick. N2MCI test 1, 2, 3. So you'll see, and there's Paul coming back to me. So it's a simple way to get the if you want to, have your own hotspot. What I like about it is if you go to a hotel and use the hotel, there's no way to get on a hotel internet onto your Pi-Star because you have to, a lot of times you have to authenticate. There's no way to do it. If you have a computer or a phone, you can go to a web page and get in through their firewall. They'll allow you to go through. And so that's why I find traveling, it's really helpful. So just wanted to show you real quick what it looks like, and turn it off, and it goes both. You can also set it in the settings, so as soon as you go into it, once you have everything configured, it'll go right in and turn everything on for you. But I just wanted to give you a quick show of what it looks like. This also, I think, Dave, you have this because I think you have a, was it you? It has the Ambi chip, and I believe you can go and you can also basically run this without a radio itself. You can, there's a section in there you can use the speaker and microphone inputs, and it'll convert, the chip will convert it over to a digital stream, and then you can just pump it right out. So I thought, Dave, you may have been had that, but
I think I have one of them, but I have never done this with it. So that's pretty cool.
I've used the Blue on my OpenGD77 setup. You
Right.
can put the radio into hotspot mode.
Yeah, when you we talked about that before, you can connect the radio up where I plugged in this thing. You can plug it in and connect your radio into Blue DV mode. And the cool thing about it is no matter where you're at, it sets the frequency, the power level. It all does it automatically through the Blue DV. It's a nice combination of things. You can also plug, like I said, that the radio with that into a Raspberry Pi and configure it to the right type of mode device that it is. And there's a lot of options, and you can get crazy on how much you want to do, but Blue DV is a nice, simple program, and it may be a way for some people to get on without having to deal with the craziness of and getting anxiety over a DV Mega or DV Mega or Pi-Star hotspot. So just as something, another thing out there that guys have come up with, another mousetrap. And with that, any questions? I think we're pretty much covered some stuff here. Obviously, I'm available as Dziomba repeater. You can get a hold of me, N2MCI at AWL.net, or is it org? Whichever one, whenever as a user. But so I'm around. Hopefully answered some questions and demystified some of this.
Pete, I've got one question, if I may.
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Oh, okay. From what I gather, what Neil just said before, that Baofeng HT that you've got the GD77, Open GD77 on, what is the model number of that HT?
This one is an 1801, but like Neil said, they came out with a newer version of it.
Yeah.
And it's not compatible anymore. I mean,
Okay.
I bought this radio for like $60.
Yeah, that's the attractive thing about it. And if you could put Open GD77 on it, but with the new chip set, no. But
I will make one statement though. If you use this as a hotspot, since it's a DMR radio, it'll only do DMR. You can't like bring this in and have D-Star talking a radio talking to this. It doesn't like, it only likes to set up for DMR, where the other regular hotspots are
more flexible. Yeah.
more flexible. They're designed for multi-mode.
Okay, cool.
This is kind of hardwired to DMR.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
it's the new versions of the 1801 and 1801A that it will not work with.
Right.
Just
Okay.
looked it up.
If you could find one of the cool features, and I haven't downloaded this yet, I don't know if you have, Neil, but you can actually set it up. So this isn't digital, but you can put information. I think they used to call them KEPs, and that's all about all this different satellites. And when the satellite is in range of you, it'll start beeping, and you can get on, and you'll know that the satellite, it'll automatically, I think it may even tune to the right frequency. I'm not sure. One of the guys was telling me about it, and you can actually talk through the ham satellites. It's takes all the magic out, all the guesswork out of it. It's all HPFM, hocus pocus, freaking magic.
Yeah,
So,
I haven't played with that feature. I'll mention one feature of that firmware. If you can find one of those radios, one of the features I really, really like is not ham radio related either. But if you've ever played with the Baofengs and a lot of these cheap analog radios and tried to program the local fire and police and snowplow frequencies in there, they scan so slow that they're not very usable. Most ham HTs do not scan at a very high rate of speed. The OpenGD77 does that firmware. It allows you to set the thing up as a scanner if you wanted as well. And I have a whole zone on my GD77 that's just called scanner. And I hit the up button and hold it, and it does high speed scanning of all the local police, fire, and everything else frequencies. And it's probably more usable than the scanner that I have. So I just thought I'd add that. There's one more thing I wanted to put out. For those of you looking to get into hotspots and want something with a little less complexity, maybe, there is a new type of hotspot that became available this year or over the last several months. It's called an O-Star, OSTAR. If you search for that on Amazon or eBay or AliExpress, you'll find them. They look just like the little Pi-based hotspots, but they don't use a Raspberry Pi. They use a microcontroller board, and everything's embedded. You don't have to deal with an SD card. It's just a little less to worry about, and they use a little less power, so you can run them on a little portable battery for days on end, because they don't draw as much power. But neat little toy. I think they sell them assembled and pre-configured for around $120.
one other thing, along what Neil was saying, it's also nice to be able to listen to some of the local DMR channels, commercial ones, and find out what, everything is. And if you want to listen, to something that you can easily identify what time slices and color codes and talk groups they're using. The other thing that's kind of neat about this is this radio also supports talker alias. And if you're on a hotspot, that just became part of the DMR standard now. You don't have to put everybody's call in there. So as soon as somebody starts talking to you, Brandmeister will include the name and the call based on what's in your Brandmeister setup, your profile. So I don't, like on this radio, I don't have, normally you would put somebody's call in there, and it's kind of like, it's like caller ID on a phone, right? If you have a cell phone, somebody calls you, all you get is the number. But if you put their number in your local address book, it translates that number to to somebody's name. And that's basically what caller ID, normally you would do that in the radio. You would add those IDs in the group section, and that will get you the name resolution for that. And that caller ID, if you're on a hotspot, it'll do that automatically for you, and then it just comes out. But not every radio has talker alias support. And I was just talking to somebody recently about that. Some radios, if you have talker alias turned on to radio and the repeater system doesn't support it, you get a lot of issues. So there's good and bad about that. Again, Mike.
I just wanted to thank Dave for helping us with this and running this for us. So I'm going to say goodnight, everybody, because I need to go to bed. So thank you again, Dave. Thanks for everybody for showing up and all that. We'll talk to you guys later.
All
Okay.
right, Mike, thank you very much for putting this together, and thank you, Pete, as well. Very much appreciated.
I'm in another club, and they're looking to this. They're looking for a pitch, so that's why I figured I would generate it for two clubs.
Very good.
Thank you both.
Are there any other questions before we finish up the presentation? All right, then I'm going to close it out. Thank you, Pete. Mike, who has already left, thanks to him, and thanks to everybody else for showing up. We'll get this compiled and stuck on YouTube in the next little while. All right.
Thanks very much.
Good night, everyone, and we will talk to you guys next week.
Yep. Bye now.
Good night,
Good night.
everyone.
Good night.
Good night.